Thank you, Professor Maki, and good morning. Welcome to everyone. I'm neither particularly famous nor a doctor, as Professor Maki had stated, but I appreciate the words. I would also like to share in the thanks to the co-organizers of the conference, as well as to the Polytechnic, and congratulate the Polytechnic on its 150-year anniversary. And thanks to the Italian Ministry of Environment for its patronage of the event, to the European Commission and the many industry associations and academic institutions which are here present. The Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer is widely considered to be the most successful agreement in international environmental policymaking to date. This treaty, which has been ratified by every country in the world, is successful because it continues to achieve its stated goals of phasing out ozone-depleting chemicals worldwide according to an agreed timetable. And it's able to achieve this because of the engagement and the actions of the different stakeholder groups. And since refrigeration and air conditioning represents the greatest share of consumption of ozone-depleting substances in all countries, it is largely thanks to the people working in this sector that the protocol has been a success so far. And as of today, 98% of controlled substances have been phased out. This considerable achievement is to a very large degree your success story. And for that, my organization, the United Nations Environment Program, offers its congratulations to you for your continuing work in protecting the global environment. Demand for air conditioning is growing. A projected 6.3 billion people will live in cities in 2050, which is up from 3.5 billion today. Cooling energy demand is projected to increase rapidly in regions where urbanization is expanding. As incomes increase, demand for space cooling rises. Penetration rates for air conditioning in urban households in China, for example, grew from 2.3% in 1993 to 61% in 2003. And the likely trends for energy demand for cooling shows that the largest increases will occur in regions with rapid urbanization and income growth, particularly in Southeast Asia and India. The demand for cooling and ventilation is not even expected to reach the saturation point by 2050. However, alongside this success and bright prospects for future growth in refrigeration and air conditioning comes the associated environmental impacts, notably those associated to the release of refrigerants and the consumption of energies. The International Energy Agency estimates that at present, heating and cooling account for as much as 46% of global final energy demand. And it also forecasts that energy use and CO2 emissions, if they continue as they are, will almost double by 2050, and according to one of their recent scenarios, this could put the world on a path towards a 6% degree centigrade rise in global average temperatures. The refrigeration and air conditioning therefore plays a major role in global energy consumption and, by consequence, CO2 emissions. Since 1997, when the Montreal Protocol was first signed until today, the global refrigeration and air conditioning sector has made tremendous advances in addressing the dual environmental threat of ozone depletion and climate change. This treaty has triggered a technological revolution, and since that time, industry has developed several generations of alternative fluids to replace CFCs, including transitional HCFCs, which are now being phased out, and alternatives that include HFCs, both of the low and high GWP varieties, as well as low and zero GWP options such as ammonia, carbon dioxide, hydrocarbons, and not-in-kind technologies. In parallel, the equipment manufacturers have researched, developed, and commercialized increasingly efficient, energy-efficient equipment. In September 2007, the parties to the Montreal Protocol agreed to accelerate the phase-out of HCFCs, which are ozone-depleting and which also have a significant global warming potential. Developed countries are already reducing their consumption of HCFCs to meet their phase-out obligations, with a complete phase-out by 2020. Developing countries will gradually phase out HCFCs, starting with a freeze in consumption and production that started on 1 January of this year, followed by a stepwise reduction resulting in the complete phase-out of HCFCs by 2030. The parties at the same meeting have also decided to encourage countries to promote the selection of alternatives to HCFCs that minimize environmental impacts, in particular those on climate, as well as meeting other health, safety, and economic considerations. For the climate considerations, this means taking the global warming potential, the energy use, and other relevant factors into account. And for refrigeration and air conditioning, this means optimizing refrigerants, equipment design, servicing practices, recovery and recycling, and disposal at end of life. On the 9th of May of this year, scientists reported that the symbolic level of CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere had reached 400 parts per million, which is the highest level that they have been for 2.5 million years. Mitigating climate change through a smart HCFC phase-out can contribute to reversing the rising CO2 emissions trends. Refrigeration and air conditioning is playing a major role in that process. The Multilateral Fund, which is the Montreal Protocol's financial mechanism, has approved about $3 billion worth of activities to assist developing countries to comply with this treaty. UNEP, along with UNDP, UNIDO, and the World Bank, are the agencies through which this assistance is delivered. And the projects that have been approved will phase out nearly 500,000 ODP, ozone-depleting potential tons, of consumption and production of ozone-depleting substances. To date, 138 developing countries already have their national plans in place to phase out HCFCs through a combination of policies, investment, and non-investment activities. And these developing countries are focusing on refrigeration and air conditioning sector. Developing countries are moving out of HCFCs and into alternatives according to these plans, but it is essential that the alternative should be chosen carefully to maximize the climate benefit. So the technology decisions that are being taken now across the globe will have a long-term impact on those countries' climate performance. And UNEP, through the Ozonaction branch where I work, is assisting developing countries with understanding this process. As of 2011, 7 developing countries still produced HCFCs. In a landmark decision, the Multilateral Fund recently agreed to provide China with $385 million to totally eliminate its production of HCFCs by the year 2030. They will be closing down production plants. China accounts for 92% of the total HCFC production of developing countries, and its HCFCs are supplied to the world's refrigeration and air conditioning sectors. The phase-out of HCFC production in China is thus fundamental to ensuring the overall success of the ozone treaties. On the consumption side, as of April of this year, there's still about 500,000 metric tons of HCFCs in developing countries still to be phased out, about 60% of which is HCFC 22, and HCFC 22 is mostly used in your sector. HFCs have become common replacements for HCFC 22 in many applications. UNEP released a synthesis report on HFCs, which was a call for early action to protect the climate system. HFCs have been introduced as replacements largely as a result of the success of the Montreal Protocol. HFCs are rapidly increasing in the atmosphere, mostly due to the increased demand for refrigeration and air conditioning, and particularly in developing countries. Some HFCs have high global warming potentials, and HFC emissions overall are growing at a rate of 8% per year. And the annual emission rates are expected to rise to between 3.5 to 8.8 gigaton CO2 equivalent in 2050, which would be equivalent to about 7 to 19% of the global CO2 emissions in 2050. Uncontrolled growth in HFC emissions may challenge the efforts to keep the global temperature rise at or below 2% degrees Celsius this century, so urgent action is needed. This concern has found root in a number of different fora. Excuse me. The European Union has taken a leadership role to control fluorinated gases as part of its policies to combat climate change. Legislation was passed in 2006, and in 2012, the EC made a proposal to strengthen it in order to cut F-gas emissions by 2/3 of today's levels by 2030. At the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development held in Rio in June 2012, countries highlighted the concern about the growth of certain HFCs, and the outcome document, which was agreed by about 100 heads of states and governments, recognizes that the phase-out of ozone-depleting substances is resulting in a rapid increase in the use and release of high GWP HFCs, and it's expressed the support for a gradual phase-down in the consumption and production of HFCs. Since 2009, 2 groups of countries have submitted proposed amendments to the Montreal Protocol concerning HFCs. One proposal was submitted by Mauritius and the Federated States of Micronesia, and another by Canada, Mexico, and the United States, and both proposals are similar. The North American proposal controls the production and consumption of 19 HFCs, including 2 HFOs, on a GWP-weighted basis. The last version of the proposal that was circulated proposes to start controlling HFCs in developed countries in 2016 and in developing countries in 2018. And recognizing that alternatives do not exist yet for all HFC applications, it proposes a gradual phase down with a plateau as opposed to a phase out. The phase down would reduce HFCs to 15% of the baseline levels by 2033 in developed countries and in 2043 in developing countries. And these proposed amendments are expected to be discussed again at the 35th open-ended working group meeting of the parties to the Montreal Protocol in June. And then depending on how it is, the reaction, it may be discussed at the meeting of the parties of the Montreal Protocol in October. UNEP has no position on these amendments, and we don't speculate on the outcome. However, I'd like to point out that, that the HFC issue is connected to the phase-out of HCFCs, and governments, industry, and NGOs are all keenly looking at the future of HFCs. Some groups are taking jumpstart actions to address the high GWP HFCs. A few are listed here. Refrigerants Naturally is an industry-led group which has taken an early leadership position in this area. More recently, the Consumer Goods Forum, a much wider body, has made a pledge about reducing HFCs by 2015. More recently, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition to reduce short-lived climate pollutants was formed in February 2012, and that involves governments, international organizations, NGOs, and representatives of industry. And I encourage you all to look into each of these initiatives to see how you might cooperate. So overall, the developing countries have done an outstanding job under the Montreal Protocol. They've met the CFC phase-out with flying colors, and they seem set to do the same with the HCFC phase-out. But the developing world is facing a series of new challenges in the transition away from HFCs, in particular in the refrigeration and air conditioning sector. And I'm going to list a couple of those quickly, and you'll see that they all have linkages to topics in this conference. The commercialization of new alternative refrigerants seems to be a patchy and slow process. New fluids are being announced by manufacturers, but they're not reaching the developing country markets as fast as hoped. In some cases, full data are not readily available, and end users in many countries also view the new chemicals as being prohibitively expensive. Equipment relying on low GWP alternatives is not available for some applications, notably room air conditioning. There may be a lock-in of high GWP HFCs in some cases, since equipment using the other alternatives is just not available. Servicing infrastructure for alternatives is lacking in many regions of the developing world. You cannot get carbon dioxide equipment, for example, serviced in sub-Saharan Africa. Technicians require training on alternative fluids, including blends, hydrocarbons, carbon dioxide, and HFOs. The safety of flammable refrigerants is a general concern. This is not necessarily limited to hydrocarbons, and it could extend to other low flammability refrigerants. UNEP and its partners have seen that in the absence of other alternatives, or in the absence of other cost-effective alternatives, Technicians in developing countries are already going ahead and retrofitting or dropping in hydrocarbons in virtually any type of existing refrigeration and air conditioning equipment, often without adequate safety measures. It is imperative that such practices are either discouraged or guided through proper training and awareness measures to ensure that safety is maintained. Formal and mandatory certification schemes for technicians is lacking in the majority of countries. They need our assistance and guidance to understand and design such programs and to ensure that only those qualified to handle refrigerants do so. And I would say that the work being done here in Europe under the EU's F-gas legislation is a model that should be shared with other regions. Countries with high ambient temperatures, such as those in West Asia region, face unique technical challenges related to the performance of air conditioning equipment. So there's a need to test, compare, and develop fluids and equipment that performs better than high GWP HFCs in such conditions. Standards for energy efficient air conditioning and energy efficient building codes could accomplish a great deal, but they're few and far between in the developing world. There's an opportunity to build more efficient standards into these regions. And the absence of standards for handling, transport, et cetera, of alternative refrigerants is one of the biggest barriers to the introduction of new refrigerants in developing countries. China is actively working on developing an entire suite of standards, and organizations like ASHRAE and ISO have much to contribute to creating a new international standards frameworks. Contaminated and counterfeit refrigerants are truly significant issues in most parts of the developing world, in particular in Africa. And these fraudulent products directly endanger human life and property. Illegal trade in HCFCs is also beginning to happen and could become a threat to the success of alternatives. And industry associations, which are key players in ensuring environmental performance of the industry, need to be established in many developing countries and strengthened in others. And there should be, I would say, networking and sharing of experience between refrigeration associations and professional associations between developed and developing countries. Great work has been done by IIR, in Europe by AREA, and North America by AAHRI. So my reasons for highlighting these challenges, some of these challenges, is that what happens in Europe and in other developed countries in terms of technology and policies influences and impacts the refrigeration and air conditioning sector in developing countries. It's a global industry, and I encourage you to seek partnerships and cooperation to help us collectively address these twin challenges of ozone depletion and climate change. And I'd like to end this on a note that is borrowed from the United Nations Secretary General's message that was issued earlier this week on the occasion of World Environment Day, which was the 5th of June. The theme this year is Think, Eat, Save, and Reduce Your Food Print. And the Secretary General noted that we live in a world of plenty where food production outstrips demand, yet where 870 million people are undernourished and childhood stunting is a silent pandemic. And one way to narrow this hunger gap is to improve the well-being of the most vulnerable. Is to address the massive food loss and waste inherent in today's food systems. And currently, at least a third of all food produced fails to make it from the farm to the table. And the refrigeration and air conditioning sector has a major role to play in addressing this challenge through the development and deployment of infrastructure and technology that can reduce the amount of food that perishes after it's harvested. I encourage you to apply your creativity and hard work to issues such as food loss with the same determination that you are confronting climate change and ozone depletion challenges under the Montreal Protocol. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Cavallini, and good morning, everyone. The introduction of this session is rather daunting because it's a wide range of subjects. So I think we're hoping to have a good discussion generated from you, the audience. So technology developments take place in the context of government policies, and we've seen how sometimes the technology is leading and ahead of policies. In other times, it's responding. But we've heard yesterday about new developments in refrigerant fluids, in equipment, in alternative approaches, and all of that is either shaped by or responding to government policies. In the national context, it's it's shaped by according to various issues. We have regional policies, as in Europe, which we're going to hear about later, and the international policy context, which is primarily Montreal Protocol and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and its successor treaties. But also there's the whole issue of standards and codes of practice that have been adopted by industry that are somehow supplemented and linked to the policies. We've heard yesterday that industry would like to have stable and predictable policy environment in which to conduct their business. And we heard also how the Undersecretary of Environment from the Italian Ministry of Environment emphasized the need to reduce red tape and bureaucracy. All of those things, I think, are laudable. We also have heard yesterday several speakers touching on Montreal Protocol and climate policy, and it's interesting to see how those run as a thread through the industry presentations in particular. All of this comes together in the theme of the conference, which I think is summed up as energy efficiency, climate change, and ozone depletion. And I keep emphasizing the ozone depletion aspect because contrary to some of the statements yesterday, the job of phasing out ozone depleting substances is not yet done globally. It may be done here to a large degree in Europe, but in the developing world, the job is still very much underway and will go on until 2030. So there's a significant amount of work left to be done. The situation in terms of policies and the direction is quite, I would say, unclear at this moment, and that is due to, I would say, the relationship between the phase out of HCFCs and what is being adopted as the next generation, and this links to, I would say, some of the uncertainties and slow progress being made in the climate arena. So with the reason that, again, this conference should be also interested in what's happening in the developing world is, first of all, your partners in business. A lot of your companies and institutions have contacts that have in developing countries. Some of them supply your markets. In other cases, you have manufacturing operations there. And we're operating in a global economy where we're all one family. So UNEP is working with about 147 developing countries to help them with their policy setting and their technology decision making. And part of my role in coming here is also to take back some of the new information and messages gleaned from your work to share with the developing countries. So overall, I think that there could be more benefit by having increased engagement between yourselves and counterparts in developing countries. UNEP and its partners are there, and we encourage you to let us know if you have interest or see opportunities for cooperation with developing countries on these technology issues. So the question really I'd like to put is how do we increase the interaction between the industry, between the scientists, the researchers, policymakers, NGOs in Europe and the rest of the world to support this goal of climate, ozone, and energy efficiency. So it's more of just throwing out that aspect of thinking of your work both in terms of the global policy context, but also in terms of how do you relate to the developing countries on the issues that you're working on. So I think in the interest of time, I'll stop there and look forward to the discussion. So thank you. An honor to be one of the concluding speakers and also one of the biggest challenges because it's very difficult to summarize a conference like this. I think the objective is really to share information and to network between ourselves And I think that goal has been admirably met. It's been a very rich 2 days of discussions. I'm struck by a couple of things. One is that this is a rather unique conference in itself. It's bringing together very technical people, regulators, international organizations, NGOs, and academia. And that doesn't happen all of the time, quite frankly. And so it is one of the, I would say, rare fora where we can come together and talk a little bit between our respective fields. And for that, I think we have to all extend our appreciation to Enrico Boni and Marco and the rest of the team at Centro Galileo for making this conference happen, and happen for 15 consecutive times. We've heard that there are a lot of challenges ahead of all of us. Challenges related to global warming potential targets, to increasing energy efficiency, to ensuring safety. We've seen things like the 400 parts per million slide of our CO2 atmospheric concentration. We've heard about the European F-gas targets, which seem to be challenging for everyone. But also the conference has shown, at least me, a lot of hope, because hearing about the technological developments, the innovation that is going on, and the dynamism of your sector, it's extremely encouraging. And I think one of the themes of this conference has been the importance of refrigeration air conditioning sector, both to climate change and to ozone depletion, and to the energy the issue. So that's the three: climate change, ozone, and energy efficiency threads that run throughout this conference. Another thing that strikes me is that you're a very modest sector with a group that has such a wide impact, such a large economic impact, such an important societal role. You all are doing work that is not widely shared in many cases, and there's a lot of interesting research going on. There's new products that are being innovated. You're meeting environmental targets and contributing to the protection of the global environment through reduction of CO2 emissions and reducing ozone depleting substances. And this work does not get shared very widely. You keep it to yourselves. It's a secret. So one thing is, I mean, that's part of our role, is to help outreach the good work that you are doing to the other communities. But I think also be a bit more proud of your own work and engage with the rest of society. Don't be so inwardly looking. I think for me, it's a humbling experience also, because I'm not a technical person, and then to see the type of work going on, it's truly impressive. I do encourage you to reach out to colleagues, peers, and other organizations working on similar issues in developing countries, because, as you know, another theme is that it's a globalized economy, it's a globalized industry, and we're all in it together. So I encourage you to reach out, and UNEP and other partners, such as those at the table and others you've heard, can help to be part of the bridge to the rest of the world. So I think, without delaying it any further, I'll turn it over to the other